Welcome to the Handle Your Own PR online PR Bootcamp. This is lesson 1 of 6 lessons where I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know about PR so that you can start your own campaigns straight away. But before we get started, there's just a couple of things like housekeeping things that we need to do. So I would suggest that you turn off your mobile phone so that it doesn't ring in the middle and distract you. You switch off your email, again, so it doesn't do pop-ups on your screen while you're trying to concentrate. Set aside the next 30 to 60 minutes to concentrate on this. Grab a pen and a notepad and perhaps a drink if you think you're going to be thirsty. Sit back, learn, and enjoy. So the first thing that you need to know is that I really, really want you to succeed, and I'm going to do everything I can to help you get featured in the media. So during this course, at any stage, you can jump onto the Handle Your Own PR members Facebook group and post any questions that you might have, or if you want to post images or even ideas, and then we can get back to you and we'll give you feedback on them. Remember that no question is a silly question. I can almost guarantee that whatever you ask me, somebody else will want to know. So feel free to ask any questions you like. And remember that learning together is the most effective way to learn. So what are we going to cover off in the next 6 lessons? Well, this lesson, as I've said, is about getting started. So we're going to talk about what you need to get together before you can start your campaign. The next lesson, lesson 2, is about identifying your media targets and working out who are the best people to go to. Lesson 3 will be about writing your media release and how to come up with some newsworthy angles. Lesson 4 is all about contacting the media. Lesson 5 is about doing it, so what you actually do and what the process is. And then in lesson 6, I'm going to talk to you about doing follow-up and how you can plan your next campaign and also get the most out of the media coverage that you do get. So, this lesson is all about getting started, and this is what I'm going to cover off in this lesson. Firstly, what you need to get together first, so that will be samples, trials, and your logo. We're going to talk about writing skills, photography, which is an incredibly important part of your campaign, quotes and whether to use them and how to use them, why use research or statistics, getting a media spokesperson or who is going to be the person that's going to speak to the media for you, and your bio and what it actually looks like. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is your logo. And everybody will need to have some kind of a logo to put at the top of their media release, because journalists tend to look to the top to understand what it is that the media release is about. So, for instance, I'll give you a really good example. With Handle Your Own PR, when I first started it, we did a media release for a client and sent it out with our logo on instead of their logo. This is back in the early days when I wasn't too familiar with PR. And it was sent to the West Australian, and they published the article. And because of our logo being at the top, they actually put our contact details at the bottom. And the next thing you know, we fielded 200 phone calls over the following week from people in Western Australia who were looking for this particular product. So hopefully that will give you an idea of how important it is to get your logo in there. So that's going to go at the top of your media release. The next most important thing, in fact, I would say it's probably the most important thing, is that you have some really, really good photography ready to go. You need to illustrate your story with a relevant image, which is ideally not using stock photography. It's getting a photographer to take some really great professional and ideally aspirational shots of your business or your product for you to use in your media release. It can actually make or break your campaign. Now, I think most of us probably know that if you have products, you've got to have great photography. But a lot of people are going out to the business media and they're not bothering to put a photograph with their media release. And I think what happens is that the journalists get loads and loads and loads of business media releases without an image. And if you can imagine, if you're a magazine or a newspaper editor and you're trying to put together a page, fantastic that you've got all this content, but ultimately you do need images. And if someone can give you an original image that they own, that's a great image, then they will use it. And a really good example of that is when we launched Handle Your Own PR back in 2009, we had some photos taken of myself and the founder. I will show them to you in a minute. And we sent it all off to the newspapers to see if we could get a story in. And we were very lucky in that The Age, we're based in Melbourne, and The Age did a fantastic half-page story on us, which we were thrilled with a big photo of myself and my business partner. And then about 2 weeks later, we got another half page in the Sydney Morning Herald, which is actually the same newspaper. I mean, it's the same staff, and they run a lot of the content across both of those newspapers. So I rang the journalist and said, "Why did you run another story for us? I mean, we're not complaining because obviously it's fantastic, but how come they ran it again?" And she said that on a Sunday afternoon, the editor had been running up and down the aisles where all the journalists were to say, "Who's got a story with an image? I've got loads of stories without images. We need something to illustrate the page." And he apparently spotted the photo of myself and my business partner and said, "Right, I want that photo on the page." And as a result, we got a double dip. Now, that was a purely business story, and it only happened because of that photography. So you do need to be aware of that. Now, your photography can include professional headshots, which I would suggest that anybody who is trying to raise their own profile in the media would have anyway, but if you don't, you definitely need them. Founder pictures, if it's a new startup or it's a very new business, then it's great to have a photo of you and your partner, if there is another partner, or just you, maybe in front of your premises or in front of something that relates to your business. Again, I'm going to show you an idea in a minute. Obviously, if you have products, you need to get great photography of your products. They really, really like lifestyle and human interest shots. And then if you have digital products or services, you can also take images. So let me just illustrate some of these for you. So this is a great example of headshots. Now, the shot on the left is a shot that I had taken by a friend who is actually has a really good eye for photography, and I thought it was a great shot. Until I saw the shot in the middle, which a professional took of me. And I mean, really, as you can see, it's just leaps and bounds ahead of the one on the left. And on the right, I've got a picture of the gorgeous Krista, who is the head of the US arm of Handle Your Own PR. And again, it's a lovely, friendly lifestyle shot. Looks great, and has a bit of animation to it. And any journalist is going to be really happy to run that shot. But you may also want to do some shots of founders that are a little bit more relevant to your business. So on the left-hand side, these are spokespeople. Obviously, we've got Jeff Kennett and Joanna Griggs there. That was for a campaign they were doing for Beyond Blue. And it's in a gorgeous garden setting, all done very professionally with professional lighting. And then you've got the two guys below who are founders, one of a real estate agent and one of a manufacturing company. And on the right, you've got shots that have worked really, really well. So the one at the bottom is a marriage celebrant, and as you can see, it's just a fantastic shot. He actually runs marriages in the laneways of Melbourne, and he's picked up loads and loads of coverage because his photography is so good. And then the shots on the left and the right at the top of the girl with the dollar signs, she actually runs a business called Finance for Women. Her name's Rhiannon. She's an amazing woman. And she said to me, "Well, what can I put? I mean, all I do is consult women about finance." And I said, "Well, if it's about money, why don't you get some big corflute dollar signs made up and get some photography taken with those?" And as a result of that, she has had loads and loads of coverage. You can imagine that Money Magazine and some of the money inserts in the newspapers would love a shot like this. It's not stock photography. It's very generic and fabulous. And then the one in the middle is myself and my business partner. This was the shot that got us loads and loads of coverage. We're holding magazines to show that we are relating to the media. And then we just had professional makeup and everything done so that we looked a bit smarter than usual. So those shots have all worked really, really well in the media. So you need something like that if you're going to be doing a business story. If you're doing a product story, then you're going to need 3 different types of shots, and this is pretty much across the range for anyone doing products. You're going to need a deep etch shot, like the one on the left, which is your product with the background cut out. And if you can imagine opening magazines on those pages where they go, "Hot things we love this month," and great products for Mother's Day, or whatever it might be, they're nearly always shots like this. So if you can provide that, you're in with a very good chance straight away. The middle shot is a product shot of the product in its packaging, so that if someone walked into a shop, they'd be able to know exactly what it looks like. And it's always really handy to have those shots as well. And then the most important shot is to have a lifestyle shot. And the product on the right is a little product for babies. It's beautifully shot. And in fact, I'll show you what happens if you take it yourself compared again to a professional photographer. The shot on the left obviously beautifully illustrates what the product does, which is that it sticks your baby's bowl to to their high chair so that they can't throw it across the room when they get to that age, which they are sometimes tempted to do. And instead, a professional shot on the right-hand side just looks so much more compelling. You can see the dish is all clean in the background. You've got him using a glass bowl, which no one in their right mind would have a young child using. But again, it demonstrates how safe and how good the actual suction on the product is. So that is the difference between using a professional photographer or trying to do the shots yourself. This next page just shows lots of lifestyle pictures, and I just really love them. So, if you look through there, they're all demonstrating what it is that the person or the product does. So, on the left-hand side, we have a product that we loved called Dry Eyes, which is to stop kids getting shampoo in their eyes when you're washing their hair. Then you've got a photograph of a great chef, Darren Simpson. Underneath that, you have a close-up of it's cladding for houses, aluminium cladding for houses, which is very hard to show if you're just taking a shot of the house. So this very clearly shows that it's extruded from a sheet metal machine and then gets attached to the side of the house. And then on the right-hand side, you've got all those beautiful shots of the scooters. You've got shots of the little ice cube container that you can put baby food in. And the one on the bottom right is a DVD called Being Dad, and the guy is there holding a beer bottle in one hand and a baby's bottle in the other, which very clearly demonstrates what it is that he does. And then I've got a selection here of just product shots so that you can see them. I think we've all seen loads of those, but that's just a selection of ones that you need to kind of get a feeling for how the lighting is and that they are kind of styled up a little bit. If you have digital products and services, sometimes it can be quite hard to work out what's the best way to illustrate them. So I've just chosen these shots to show you what other people have done. You could show from behind yourself on your website and sort of show the homepage for it. You can show an app and actually the app on the screen of a phone. And again, on the right-hand side, they've done something similar. So again, that's just some great illustrations if you've got a digital product. So let's talk about samples and trials. Now, if you've got products, then I would say that you need to set aside roughly 20 to 30 units, which you will need when a journalist says, yes, I'd really like to do a story on this. They will often ask for a sample so that they can actually see and touch and feel it. If you can, then, and we'll talk about this a bit later, but you should also try and set aside some units for competitions and giveaways, because that's a really good way of getting media coverage if you can't get a straight story up. Now, if you have a service-based business or it's a digital business, then you need to work out a way for the journalist to experience your service. So if you're a website, can you make them a temporary member? Can you allow them to download the app? If they're coaching, can they talk to one of your success stories? Could they talk to maybe one of your customers? But you will need to try and help the journalist experience what it is that your business does. Now, the other things that you need to know about samples and trials are normally if you send them off to a journalist, you shouldn't expect to get them back unless they're very, very high value. So I think most journalists know, like the rest of us do, that if you are selling a product at $30, then it probably is only costing you about $5. So you need to be prepared to give them to the journalist and not expect them back. But if you do want it back, then you need to make it super easy for them. So what I would normally do is send the product along with a pre-filled out courier label or a pre-addressed stamped envelope that they can send it back to you with. And you can supply, particularly if it's fashion items, you can supply products for a photo shoot and get them returned. But again, I would send it to them with a pre-filled out courier form, and I would also list all the items that you've given them so that they know they need to collect it all before they send it back to you. If you have products with a really high retail value, for example, at one stage I was working on a pram brand, and we had prams and strollers that were $1,500 each. So obviously you're not going to hand those out willy-nilly to people. So what you can do is you can have one item that you then circulate to all the media and let them road test it. And we've done this before, and journalists really do understand, but they still want to have that opportunity to try it for themselves. That gives people the opportunity to review it or road test it. And then when they've finished, they can either send it back to you, or if you've got another journalist that wants to review it, you can give them the courier label to attach and send to the next person to review it. So obviously you need to tell them that it's going to go to someone else so that they don't wreck it or damage it in any way. But it can be a really good way of road testing, particularly when the item is a high value. So you would give them beautiful high-res images so they can see what the product looks like all nice and new, and maybe some close-ups of some of the features, but you would also let them use the product, but ensure that they either send it back or send it on to the next one. Now, for any of you that remember Kerry Ann's show, I will never forget giving her a stroller for her show so that they could do it as a bit of a catwalk thing. And at the end of it, God love her, she signed it for us. So we ended up having to offer it as a charity item, but that sort of thing can happen as well. And there's really nothing you can do about it. You just have to be very grateful, really, that they've given you airtime and it's gone on to television anyway. So that's just a bit of a sort of a hands up about what you need to know about samples and trials. So after that, we need to talk about your writing skills, because it's very important to a journalist who spends all day, every day, looking at written material and writing themselves, that you don't send them a media release where your grammar is all over the place, you don't have full stops and capital letters where they should be, or your sentences don't make sense. Basically, you need to know the difference between there, and there. That's the way that we put it. Your spelling and grammar, as I've said, are very, very important. So if you don't feel that you can do it yourself, then get someone else to do it for you. Now, we do have that service on the website. If you get to the stage where it's write your media release and you're not comfortable, you can get one of our journalists to write it for you. The other alternative is, if you can't do it well yourself and you want to come to one of our 2-day PR accelerators, we sit with you and we write it and we massage it and we edit it there on the spot, so that you end up with some beautifully crafted and written media releases that you'll be comfortable with, because we've looked at them, we've spell checked them, and we've actually checked that the copy makes sense and that you have put everything in the right spot, if you know what I mean. The next thing that you need to make sure is ready to go before you start a PR campaign is that your website is live and ready for traffic by the time the article or story is published or aired. So a journalist can look at the website in beta, that is never a problem, but they will need to know that your website is going to be up and ready by the time the story has been published. Now, I will talk about this a bit later, but if you are targeting monthly magazines, they tend to work 2 or 3 months ahead. So you will find that you've got 2 or 3 months grace before you actually need to have the website up and running. However, if you go to a blogger or you go to television or radio, then you need to be aware that they work on very short time frames and that your website will really need to be ready to go before you even approach them, because they could have stories up within hours or certainly within a couple of days. Remember, of course, too, that your potential customers will want to see your website. That's the first thing that people do these days. If they like the sound of something, they've read about it in a magazine or they've heard you in an interview, the first thing they're going to do is jump onto their laptop or their phone and look up your website. So you really do need to make sure that it's all looking a bit spiffy and ready to go. And the other thing is that your website is going to need to convert people once they get there. So the PR will definitely send people to your website, but you do need to have some kind of a message on your website that also relates to the article that you're doing, because there's no point people reading all about your thought leadership in, I don't know, business finance, and the fact that you run workshops and then go to your website and there's no mention of the workshops. So make sure that there is a reference on the homepage to the product or the story that you're publicising. The next thing is that most media releases need to include a quote. Now, the quote could be from you, so it could be something about the reason why I set this up was, or this business up was because I wanted to help people. It could be from one of your customers. And we had a great situation where for a few years ago, we were working with a lot of kids' products, a bit like the scooters that you saw earlier. This was a skateboard. And what we did was we put in quotes from kids. So we said, Johnny, 10, said, "This is really cool. I love this. I can't wait to do it with my friends." And then you might have a quote from the mum saying, I'm delighted that Johnny has it because it keeps him out of the house all day. So you can play around with your quotes. You may want someone else to endorse your business. So it could be a customer. It could be anyone really, but you just will need to include some kind of a quote that just what the journalists often do is pull out the quote and use that to divide up the paragraphs, as you may have seen before. So you can even suggest to them the quotes that you would like them to use, but do include some quotes in your media release. And remember, it can't be too commercial. So the biggest problem that I find small business owners have is that they are way too commercial in the way that they pitch their stories. And so the journalist goes, "This isn't a story, this is an ad," and sends it straight to the advertising department. So you don't want a customer going, "This is the best product I've ever had. I would recommend it to anyone." It's much better if you can say how it solved a problem. So it would be much more effective to say, this greengrocer is fantastic, not because it's just a fantastic new greengrocer, but because in this particular area, you haven't been able to buy organic products before now, and now you're able to buy them. So that would be a much more effective quote from a customer. The other thing that journalists, particularly newspapers and the business media, love is research and statistics. And you can actually hang a whole story off some research and stats. Most news and business stories are enhanced by them. But remember that you can also use research that's already been published as long as it's not too old. And when I say too old, it really needs to have been published within the last 6 months. Because otherwise journalists will say, look, things could have changed since then, so it's not really relevant anymore. But if you have a medical product or a business product and you can find some statistics that may be overseas, doesn't have to be in Australia, that you can include in your media release, it can be very, very powerful. If you can't find statistics that you like, or you do a lot of your own kind of research, then you could conduct your own survey. The only thing you need to remember is that newspapers generally prefer you to have over 300 responses. So it may be that you need to go out in your own social media channels or out to your own database and perhaps into some other groups on LinkedIn or on Facebook that will give you some answers that you're looking for. But they generally, as I said, prefer you to have over 300 responses because then they think that's a pretty good sample. However, if you do your own survey, you can structure the questions in a way that will give you the answers that you want. So it's a bit sneaky, but it can be really, really effective. So for instance, if I was going to go out to handle your own PR customers and I was writing an article about how most small business owners don't have a lot of money for marketing, and therefore PR is the most effective way to do it, I might ask questions such as, if you had a small marketing budget, would you prefer to get free editorial coverage or to put an ad in the local paper or to have word of mouth or whatever? So I might give them 3 or 4 different choices, knowing that they're probably going to give me the answer that I'm looking for. Another one might be if you have a product that is yoga classes for kids, you might actually ask mums the questions of, would you like your child to be calmer? Would you like your child to be doing something that would be something that they could do for the rest of their lives? In which case, you can then go to the media saying a survey of over 300 women has shown that most of them would like their children to be calmer, and that yoga definitely ticks the boxes for them. So you can see then how you've kind of manipulated it, but it is a genuine result that you want. But you can use the results to prove your point if that's what you're looking for. The next thing we've got to talk about is who is going to speak to the media. Now, in 99% of cases, I would suggest you do it yourselves, because really in fact, all business media want to speak to the owner of the business. However, if you can't speak English very well or you just are way too nervous, then you will need to nominate somebody else who will be able to do those interviews for you. It could be your business partner. It perhaps is an ambassador. So for those of you that have a little bit more money or some great connections with someone who's got a bit of media profile themselves, then you could ask them to be your spokesperson and to speak to journalists on your behalf. It could also be one of your customers. Again, I would suggest it's someone with a bit of profile or someone that's an expert in your field, something that's going to make it relevant to their readers or to the people who are going to be, watching the interview or reading the article. The other thing that's really important is your biography, and they call it a bio in the media. It's normally just a paragraph or maybe two paragraphs, a description of yourself and your career and why you set up your business. So, this is not a resume. You don't need to tell people what degrees you've got. It's much more about, although you can obviously, but it's much more about what your business is doing, why you set it up, and maybe a little bit about your background if that's relevant. So, once you've done your bio, you can keep it as a separate document if anyone wants to know a bit about your background, or you can use it as a little paragraph that ends each of your media releases. Often, though, the bio is used, particularly for radio and TV, as the basis for asking you questions. So they're going to skim through it, see a couple of bits that are in your bio, and go, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to ask them about that." So it is very important, particularly when you're doing radio and TV. And in the business media, it's often written at the very bottom of the article. So, say you've written an article about something important. At the very bottom, it might say, "This article was provided by," and it'll do a little headshot and then it'll do your little bio. So, and normally it'll also say, "For more information, go to www dot and give a link to your website." So, that is what a bio is. And you do need to write your bio before you get started on your PR campaign. So your biography doesn't need to be very long, as I've said, just 1 to 2 paragraphs, but it does somehow need to demonstrate your knowledge or qualifications. So it may be that just having worked for 10 years in this industry, you know, Mary Smith is perfectly positioned to understand how small business owners work or why food products should be kept in the fridge or whatever it might be. It can also have a fun element or personal details. For instance, if it's a parenting product, then maybe show that you're a parent. You could talk about how many children you have. If it's a business offer, perhaps you can talk about why you set up the business or where the gap was in the market or what the problem is that your business solves. Here's an example of a biography. Um, I often think of it as the paragraph that you might have in the About Us section on your website. So you might be able to lift it from that anyway. But Gabrielle is a woman who used to run a business called 1001, which was all about corporate storytelling and the importance of telling stories in the media. Stories in business in order to not seem quite so salesy. So hers, as you can see, says she's an expert in communication and thought leadership. She's a successful entrepreneur. She has helped entrepreneurs raise millions of dollars and business owners increase their sales by using the power of storytelling. And for more information, go to www. So a beautiful short one, and she would put a little headshot in with that as well. Here's another example. Katrina is a woman who was running a daily deals site in Perth for parents for a long time, for over 3 years. And what we did was we said she has helped over X businesses gain new customers, increase their cash flow, and create awareness of their brand in that time. And then say that she's passionate about helping small business owners achieve their growth and sales goals. So again, you can see it's not a resume, but it very clearly positions her as somebody who knows what she's talking about. All right, so in order to make the most of all these lessons, I really need you to set aside the time to try and complete the tasks after each lesson before you start the next one, because this is sort of a progressive course. So by the end of this, you will have everything ready to go. So I would, if I was you, set aside at least a couple of hours a week to try and get the homework done. If you stay up to date, then by the end of it, you will have actually sent out your release. And if we're lucky, you'll get a response before the course ends. And I would reiterate that you have invested in this course, so you really should make the most of it. There's no point throwing money into something and then not actually getting a result from it. And this course is structured so that you can get a result. So please do. So let's talk about your homework for this week. I want you to write your bio, a simple paragraph or two about you or your spokesperson. You need to sort out a logo that you can put in your header. Now, some people have logos that are on black backgrounds. You might want to reverse that and get that done so that it will sit very nicely at the top of the page. And probably most importantly, you need to organize your photography. Now, with any of this, if you're not sure about the photography or you're not sure about your bio or even your logo, then post it up on the Facebook members page, Handle Your Own PR members, and we'll be able to give you feedback straight away. So, next week's topic, as I mentioned earlier, is about identifying your media targets, and I'll look forward to helping you in the next lesson. So, thank you and have a great week.